Wow, guys, we got a good one for you today. We are going to be talking about some Joe Rogan and some God. And scientist Mr. Stephen Meyer stops by the Joe Rogan podcast. And Joe seems to have a silly question that I don't know why people even ask it anymore. It's so elementary. Because it's really just not, he's too smart to ask a question like that. Why is there sickness and why is, this I mean, if there's this grand designer that's created everything, do you not think that those type of things have not, they're not involved? He would not create, it's not a he or she. The spirit wouldn't create those kind of things. Those things are created by man because they're living fallen creation. So let's just jump over in here and just hit the darn old play button. And let's see what Joe and Dr. Meyer have got to say here. Thank you guys for coming and hanging out with me, man. This is a good topic. I enjoy this stuff. So, life lessons and those kind of things are always something that I enjoy. Long discussions and thinking about this kind of stuff, and not just to prove somebody wrong to make Joe look foolish, because he answers him in a very intellectual way deeper than I would have went with him, and it just kind of goes over his head. You can tell he's just resistant. Some things, and that's okay. He's in the flesh and he's living of this world, and he's a lost soul. But guys, spirit may be dealing with him. You never know. Let's see what he got to say here.
Why did God create war? Why does God create murder? Why does God create all the horrific things we see in the news, school shootings? Why would God create a mind that acts in that way?
Well, I think the traditional theistic answer to that is the free will defense. It's not that God created those things. He created free agents, knowing that it was better to create free agents who had the ability to choose, and therefore to choose to love him or not, or love each other or not, than it was to create puppets. But with that decision to create free moral agents, there was also the risk that people would use that freedom for to exploit others and to harm others.
Sorry, but how do you react to the argument of determinism then?
Okay, determinism is some different type religion kind of stuff where they're going to explain it and go through it. That things for your life are already determined, no matter how your life situation is. If you're Ben Carson and you grew up in the projects and you have a terrible life and your mom works a lot of jobs and you barely get by and you have no dad around and you're of a certain skin color, then you're predetermined statistically, then you're predetermined to be a certain way. And then not skin color, not even involved. Well, that sounds about like my life. Never been to prison, never been in no kind of real trouble besides speeding tickets or something, racing and still silly stuff like that, So it just makes it a matter of fact that things are just predetermined, period. But then he backs up on it because then he says, well, it's a thing of free will and determinism. Like, well, no, duh, because if there's one opportunity for free will to have a choice, then determinism is gone. There is no determinism if you have one choice in any situation. There's a choice in all situations. But the problem is these people that are of non-spiritual beliefs can't fathom the idea that you can have free will to choose what you want to choose. Why? I don't know. Because if you're such a brain, determinism, you're basically saying the brain is weak. Okay, and that's what they're going to fix. They're going to get into here for a little bit, and I'll skip through a little bit of it because Mr. Meyer is hard to follow. And Joe says you're hard to follow here because he is. He's super smart, and he goes into really deep detail about things. He could have just said, Joe, God didn't make those things. Do you understand that God created the universe and the air that you're breathing and the stars that shine at night? God don't create war. Man does. Sinful flesh men, women, humans. We create war because we're fallen angels. We're sinners that fell out of the grace of God. We're not worthy of any of that. That's why his son came. It's a fallen creation. If there wasn't any sickness and war, then what'd be the point of Christ coming back? That's so foolish for him to say something like that. And these people, these atheists, the non-believers, are theologists, they believe in certain types, maybe there was a deitist. There's something out there that created us. Bro, that's not going to matter. You're going to bust hell wide open believing that. There's going to be a lot of good people in hell. I say it a lot right here on this channel. Let's keep going.
In the face of this argument that God created free will.
Unpack that a little for
Determinism.
me. Yeah,
the concept that like when you see someone who's in jail, say he made a bad decision, he went to jail.
Right.
But if you go back through that person's life, you go through their
right.
Yeah, their life, the childhood, the horrific traumas, all the abuse they've suffered, in and out of the justice system at a very young age, surrounded by crime.
Tragic stuff. Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
It's not a free will issue entirely. There's a lot of variables.
That don't make no sense. He just said, like, it's determinism, but then he just said, well, not entirely. So basically, you're not even making any sense to even go along, with your own argument. Because if there's, like I said, there's one chance to choose freely, then determinism can't be real. It just means that the brain does not work. That's just determined. It don't matter what you do. If you live in this certain area of the world, you're a drug dealer. If you live up here up north and you're Eskimo, that's all you ever be is Eskimo. Can't do it. You live in Africa, out here you can't do nothing. Can't go play sports. You can't go be a fantastic writer or an author or an actor, a jet pilot. It don't make no sense. It's just silly. It's really just childish.
Understood. The philosophical way of thinking about that is to make a distinction between sort of necessary conditions and sufficient conditions. Many of those. Well, actually, let me go a different direction. There's two different views of human nature. One is that we are moral agents, free moral agents, and one is that we're completely determined by genes, environment, or evolutionary past. And I'm convinced that even in the face of terrible environmental conditions in our background, we are still free to choose. I think there are certain types of backgrounds that incline people towards a tendency to harm others and to do things that we would regard as crimes. But I think we still are free. I think that's a fundamental.
There's some real clear research into trauma in the developmental cycle of children, how it leads to psychopathy and all sorts of other real serious problems.
Sure, no
where
question.
Free will comes into question, and determinism makes a better argument.
Determinism makes a better argument for what? For what? Because of how your life is and how you grew up and what, where you live at. Of course, if your mom and your dad are drug dealers and you live in an abandoned hut somewhere and you wake up every day and you get beat and you have terrible, tragical things that happen to you in your life, I would say that determinism does have a part. Why does it make a better definition for it? Why does it? So that means anybody that's ever had anything terrible happen in their life, then, this person, well, that's it. They're going to just be whatever they're going to be there. And it's already determined. They're going to be just like that. That's not true. They still have a choice. They still have a choice in there. And he goes on, and here in just a minute, and he backs right out of it again. I really like Rogan's podcast, but he's arguing silly points with a guy that's way smarter than him. And I'm not saying I'm smarter than either one of them. I'm not. I enjoy this stuff and I like to talk, but the determinism makes it better. It don't. How does it? It don't.
I would. There's a great philosopher of
how do you respond to that?
I would say that those are predisposing inclinations that are probably necessary to explain the behavior, but not sufficient. That I think even in the face of things that incline us towards certain courses of action, we still have choice. And I think there's a lot of brain physiological research that shows that that supports the idea that the mind is not completely determined by the neurophysiological correlates or the underlying brain chemistry.
Are we isolating for any reason?
What's that?
Are we isolating these two variables for any reason, whether it's determinism or free will? Like why does one have to win out?
I would agree.
Well, then what are you talking about? Why did you say that well, determinism makes a better argument for all these situations. It's just predetermined their life, and God's not real, and nothing's real, and there's nothing that ever somehow something created us. We just all came up from pond scum, and it's just determined that we come from a tadpole and oozed up out of the water and walked upon the ground, and we turned into monkeys eventually, and we evolved from monkeys. There's no proof of none of that. Those are all theories. Nobody has anything to prove any of that. So why are you making it? Don't have to be either or, because it can be both. Yes, you're going to be predetermined to be blue-eyed by genetic coding. Usually if a parent, one is blue and one's brown, or if both parents are blue-eyed, you're probably going to be brown, or vice versa. I like his podcast. I keep saying that again and again, I know, but I just don't understand where he's going with this. What? He says one thing and he backs out. Well, they don't have to be either or. It could be both. He just said that, these situations from these psychological standpoints of evaluating these children, that this study that he mentioned, that he didn't tell what it was or anything, just smoke. I don't know. He's just blowing. Now, he does do a lot of research stuff. The truth, Joe, it's just the truth. And there's only one book that's the truth. And that's what we're hunting for. Here's the truth. But is he ready for the truth? I think Spirit's dealing with Joe, and maybe this is how you can break through to him. But you can't be short and easy-tempered, because he's spiritually, he's where I was when I was 5 in Sunday school, spiritually. He's just thinking about it, and he's asking a lot of questions. And really, there's just the only question you need to really ask is, Lord, will you forgive me? I failed you. I believe you rose from the dead. Help me to walk a better life and be with me on a daily basis. Help me to overcome these things of the earth, and be with me on this journey as I will go through earth. I believe that you're the Son of God. But he's too tough. He thinks he's just too much of a tough guy just to be able to lay down your life, to submit to Christ and his teachings. 27,000 translations proves to me that it's and the number one selling book in the world proves even more. All these books and stuff wasn't lost over translations. It just proves that there's that many copies of this book. It's a real stories. It's accounting from real people that seen Christ even after he died. This for that one thing, for example. Okay.
I think
let's get back into
if you allow any free will at all, then we're not completely determined.
Yes. If you determine one free will at all, if there's one thing, then determinism is not the complete answer. It can't be. It cannot be. Because if you've made one choice in your life to whether to get up and run or to stay and fight, for one example, that's a choice. And then your life can be determined after that mark, and so on and so forth. It can be a little bit of both, but it can't be determinism completely. It'll never be that.
In which, but no one's saying completely.
Yeah,
I mean,
right. Well,
the determinism proponents are.
Then we're agreeing, Joe. I once heard an excellent lecture from a Berkeley philosopher of mine, John Searle. He was the guy who did the famous Chinese room paradox. And
what is that? It's not that famous.
Well, okay, let's bracket, and I'll get to the main point.
Okay.
The main thing is, and he showed that with all the research we've had in brain science, neuroscience, we've shown that there are lots of things that are necessary conditions of certain brain states, and necessary conditions, physiological, necessary physiological. So to have a certain brain state, there must be there are underlying physiological correlates that must be in place. To use that brain state to make a certain course of action, to accomplish a certain course of action. Also, there are necessary necessary conditions, necessary correlates. But he showed but we've never in the research showed that have closed the gap between necessary and sufficient. That just because those states are there doesn't mean that someone is forced to make that choice or to undertake that course of action. And so I think you
Well,
have.
you're aware of that as a person, though, right?
I'm aware of that as a person all
Yeah.
the time. I wake up grumpy in the morning because I didn't get enough sleep. It doesn't mean
Right.
I have to slap one of my kids.
Yes, that's a good that's a good answer from a scientist guy. That's not meaning that all people that are smart noodle writers and English people are not antisocial. They're just humbly shy because they're kind of inward. You know, they're not real good at getting out and speaking with people. But he made a good example. Just because I wake up grumpy in the morning, don't mean I'm going to just start slapping my kids around. That's what he's just saying. This philosophy from this guy is saying that just because there's one thing, don't mean that is necessarily the outcome. It's not. There's still choices. Now, would it be harder for one person than the other? Sure. By your environment? Sure. I'm sure it's harder for a kid to come out of the downtown city of New Orleans to be a dentist than it would be some kid out of upstate Maine somewhere, that lived with Ivy League parents, and had that type of upbringing. But they can both do it. And it may mean more to the kid that come from the inner city of Louisiana where crime is high, because he really had to work for it. I don't know, man. He's killing me on some of these answers. He's killing me.
Of course, yeah.
So,
but that's why it's kind of a combination of the things.
It is a combination, but in saying it's a combination, you and I are saying the same thing.
Yeah.
There's an element of agency that is retained. I would say for almost all people. I do think there are people who have lost it, if you will, in the sense. I mean, I think there is a legitimate insanity plea.
Sure.
But it's been way overused.
Yeah. Just to say that, well, he's crazy. He killed all these people because he's crazy. Yeah, there's something wrong with him. Yeah, we can all admit that. As somebody that goes off and just, kills a bunch of people, there's something wrong. But it's an underlying condition, and some of it had to do with his nature, of just maybe, he's just a little off a little bit, and some to do with some nurture. Go back and look up about Charles Manson, how he lived his life. He was in orphanage time before he was a teenager. His mom was a prostitute. He was talking about riding trains when he was, 14 years old. What crazy life he lived. He didn't have no kind of parenting. Charles Manson didn't know up from down. Or you come from like the twins, come up in this super rich house and just, I don't have this twisted idea just to kill your parents. So it's the same kind of, you could say you have two brothers come from the same house. One of them gets up every day and goes to work, and the other one decides to do drugs and just be nothing. Come from the same house, because you have choices. It's not necessarily just straight determined. It's silly. That's a silly idea, and it means the human mind is small, and I don't like it. It's just silly.
Because we have an underlying commitment to materialism and determinism. Here, let me tell you a story.
But let me step in that.
We
also have psych drugs. There's a real issue with that as well. There's a lot of people that are on medications, and medications have horrible side effects and unintended effects.
I don't know what he's trying to get
There's a lot of that as well.
Yeah, I agree. I'm a big fan of the work of Jeffrey people, but that for many anxiety disorders, it's also really important to retrain the thinking patterns that lead to anxiety. That there's a mind over matter aspect as well. 1925 is the famous Scopes trial with Clarence Darrow. The year or two before that, I can't remember the exact year, there's a famous Leopold and Loeb case in Chicago. Two young college students commit a horrific murder. They're taking philosophy courses from a professor who is an advocate that the really enlightened person extricates themselves from bourgeois morality and chooses their own morality. And so these two young college students end up killing a 12-year-old boy for the thrill of it, was the justification. They're convicted, they're tried, they're convicted, they're awaiting sentencing, and the ACLU sends out Clarence Darrow to argue for leniency, for clemency, or for leniency in the case. And he makes the first diminished responsibility plea in American jurisprudence history. He says, was Dickie Loeb to blame? Yeah.
Why?
Yeah. It was a 1925 case. It's the Scope trial. I looked it up earlier when I was looking at some of the end parts of this Scope trial. 1925, where a case where these two boys, like he said, had killed this child. And he just kind of comes up on his own and says, well, you know, they can't be held to what they do because of evolution, you know, and just, you know, some people are bad and they're just one of them people. You know, they shouldn't go to prison for that. So determinism shows that we have a weak brain. That's my punchline on the end of that. And, you know, what does God want? He goes on in this interview. You can go back, go on Spotify and watch the whole thing. You know, Rogan's struggling to understand, you know, well, what does God want from us? You know, God wants us to worship him. He wants us to know that his son Jesus is the way, and that we live in a fallen creation that's terrible, and it makes no sense, and it hurts our feelings sometimes. And we, our own people that are Christians, live through things on a daily basis that we just think, Lord, you know, why are we even here? What are we doing? I promise you there's something better. There's something better waiting. We're passing through this old world. Don't get caught up in the hedge bush, because there's a paved gold road waiting on you. And if you're not sure about your salvation, you're watching and you don't know, you're kind of along the lines of Joe Rogan, think, well, this world is falling. You know, why does God let these things happen? God don't create those wars. We create those wars with ourselves because our egos are so big we think we need to own stuff, and we're greedy. Christ told them to walk away from all your money and your riches. Go give it all away. Well, let me go back home. No. Follow me right now. Don't say you need to go home and fix something. The end is coming soon. Things are happening that are showing their hand. And it's going to happen sooner than later, because there's one fact, people, that you will never be able to get away with. Ain't none of us getting out of this place alive. Okay? So that's all I wanted to share. And again, I like Rogan. I like what he does. I watch a lot of his stuff. He's a big thinker, man. I like that. I dig it. I'm a thinker too. But like in the beginning, Mr. Meyer talks. The reason the scientists even thought about thinking the things that they thought to figure out gravity, Newton, those type of things. They were Christians. They're curious about how God made all this place so wonderful. And it is. And he's got something better for you. So without any hesitation, get in that New Testament, go study. Just start reading, man. Just get in Romans. Open right now. Just open your Romans. Just hit chapter 1 and read a couple chapters. Hope God will be with you through the week, and keep your heads clear and your hearts full of God. We appreciate you, and we'll see you around pretty soon. Thank you for stopping by. Some life lessons and studies on the Big Matt Podcast channel. We appreciate it.